Need some GED math help to pass the GED math section? Then you're in the right place. Hi, this is Parker from Test Prep Champions, teaching you how to pass the GED fast. You can get started by clicking subscribe down below. So we're going to do another GED math practice quiz today, and the reason that I'm filming today is because I have a GED test taker who's using my ebook to help with the GED test and had some questions about a few of the problems, so we're going to take a look at them today. And some of those topics are finding the value of x that makes an expression or a function undefined, factoring quadratic equations, distributing binomials, exponent rules, and also combining like terms. So let's get right into it. The first question in this quiz is question 1 for the quiz, but it's number 28 because this came out of my ebook, and it's for which value of x is the expression y equals 7x divided by 2 minus x undefined. So you have multiple choice answers here, so pause the video, try to figure this question out, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to try this question out. So the main idea here is that we're going to take the bottom part of the fraction, which we call the denominator, and we're going to set it equal to 0. So whenever you have a fraction like this, the bottom number, or the bottom part of that fraction is what we call the denominator, which I'm going to just abbreviate with a d. Now the top part of any fraction is what we call the numerator. Alright, so the idea here is that we're going to take the denominator and we're going to set it equal to 0, and we're going to solve for x. So what do I mean by set it equal to 0? Well, we're just going to take everything that's in the denominator, so our 2 minus x, and we're just going to set it equal to 0. So we're just going to take 2 minus x, write an equal sign, and put our 0 right here. And what we're doing is we're going to solve for x. And what I mean by solve for x, that just means we want to get x by itself on one side of our equation. So we see that we have 2 minus x. So the opposite of subtraction is addition. So we want to add an x here. So minus x plus x, the x's are going to cancel out. Now whatever you do to one side, you also do to the other. So we have to add an x on our right-hand side of the equation. So we end up with 2 equals x, and so the answer is D. So these questions are pretty standard. You can expect that you'll probably get something like this on the GED. It might say for which value of x is the expression undefined. They might also say function for which value of x is the function undefined. But for a case like this, it's the same exact strategy. And the reason why this makes sense is because you can never have a 0 in your denominator. Okay, so see how we found that 2 is equal to x? Well, what happens if we take our denominator, right, and we plug 2 in for x? What happens to it? Okay, so let's leave 7x alone up here, right? So we don't need to touch that. But what happens if we do 2? And since we know that x is equal to 2, what happens if we take this 2 here and we substitute it in for our x, right? So remember how up here in the equation we have an x here. So all I'm doing is I'm putting 2 in place of the x. So we now have 7x divided by 2 minus 2, which is 0. Okay, so if I rewrite that, we would have, and I'm rewriting it right here, we would have 7x over 0, and you can never divide by 0. All right, that's going to give you an error. And if you don't believe me, just take any random number. So you could pick like 10, or you could pick 12, and if you just put 10 into your calculator and divide it by 0, you're going to get an error message because you can never divide by 0. Okay, so that's the trick here, but the main thing is take that denominator, set it equal to 0, solve for x, and that's the answer. So for those who'd like to see the written solution, if that's how you learn best, here's the written solution up on the screen. And I'm not going to show this up here for very long because it's basically restating what I just showed you. But for those who want to see the solution in writing, you can pause the video now, take your time, jot this down, add it to your notes. And like I said, pause the video and take all the time you want with this, but we're going to keep moving on with question 43, which is question 2 for our quiz. And this question is consider parenthesis 2x minus 1 parenthesis, then we have parenthesis 3x plus 11 parenthesis. So we've got two binomials here, and the question is asking you how can these two binomials be distributed? And we've got answer choices here, A, B, C, D, and E. So pause the video now, take a stab at this, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, let's go over how to do 43. So first of all, what does binomial mean? Well, a binomial is a kind of a type of polynomial. So poly means many, nomial means terms. So the word polynomial, remember and think of it as meaning many terms. And bi means two. Okay, you can remember that by thinking of a bicycle. So a bicycle has two wheels, and a tricycle has three wheels. So a trinomial has three terms, binomials have two terms, and then monomials, mono meaning one. Obviously, a binomial or a monomial will only have Okay, let's go over 43 now. So first of all, what is a binomial? Well, a binomial is a polynomial. So poly meaning many, nomial meaning terms. So polynomial means many terms, and binomial means two terms. Okay, think of riding a bicycle. There are two wheels, a bicycle, binomial. Binomial has two terms. Now think of a trinomial. So a tricycle has three wheels. So remember, trinomial, three terms, binomial, two terms, and then we can also have monomials, that's kind of a mouthful, mono meaning one, so one term. So we see that we've got 2x minus 1, there's two terms there. In the second binomial, we have 3x plus 11, we see two terms there as well. And so basically, remember that whenever you get a question that says, how can two binomials be distributed, you want to use the FOIL method. So binomials, so remember binomials, and when you want to distribute binomials, you want to use the FOIL method. Okay, so this is also very, very, very important for the GED test. Okay, so if you haven't been listening up until now, make sure that you listen very closely here and maybe add this in your notes. So the FOIL method, you use that to distribute binomials, and this is important to know for your test here. So what does this word FOIL, what does it mean? Well, it stands for first, so the F is for first, the O is for outer, I is for inner, and L is for last. So if you're confused and you don't know what the heck this even means, don't worry because we're going to explain it right now. So we have to look at our binomials here. Okay, so 2x minus 1 is a binomial, 3x plus 11 is a binomial. So let's look at the first term in each of the binomials. So the first terms are 2x and 3x. So what we want to do is we want to multiply 2x times 3x. Okay, so the coefficients here the coefficients are 2 and 3. All right, and our variable is the x. So a variable is just another word for an unknown. Okay, so 2 times 3 gives us 6. Okay, and x times x gives us x squared. So from multiplying the first two terms together, we see that we get 6x squared. So that takes care of our f. So now we want to focus on our O, our outer term. So the outer term, so we look at the first term in the first binomial, which is 2x. We want to look at the last, or we want to look at the outermost term here, right, which is 11. So we want to do 2x times 11. Okay. What is 2 times 11? Well, 2 times 11 is 22, and we bring the x along, so 2x times 11 becomes 22x. And it's a positive number, so we have our plus sign here. So we now have 6x squared plus 22x. Okay. Now that takes care of our outer. So what about the inner term? So now we want to look at the innermost terms here. So we want to look at 1, and we want to look at the innermost term of the second binomial here, which is 3x. So minus 1, and we have to remember to bring this minus along here. That's very, very important. So we have negative 1 times 3x, and so that gives us negative 3x or minus 3x, however you want to think about it. So we now have minus 3x down here. Okay. And so we're going to add, or I should say subtract, we're going to do 22x minus 3x, and that's going to give us 19x. Okay, so we now rewrite this as 6x squared plus 19x. And so lastly, we want to focus on the last terms, right? So the terms that we haven't multiplied yet. And the only combination that we haven't done yet is we have negative 1 and 11 here. So we haven't done that yet. So if we do that, we see minus 1, and remember to bring the minus. So we have minus 1 times positive 11. That's going to give us minus 11 here. And so how can the two, it says consider how these two binomials can be distributed. Well, this is the answer we get. We get 6x squared plus 19x minus 11. So this is just a general diagram of how to use the FOIL method from my book here. And again, we see we have first, outer, inner, last, and we have a formula down here. It's right here. We have the first binomial, A plus B. Second binomial is C plus D. And I've got A, B, C, and D here because this is just a general formula, because we obviously don't know what the terms are going to be. The terms will be different depending on the exact question, but just remember here, your first terms we would do the A times the C, which is blue, then we do outer, which is the A term and the D term, then we do our inner, which is the B term and the C term, and last, which is B and D. So again, you can pause the video and you can take your time on this, add it to your notes if you'd like to. And then also one more thing I wanted to show you from the book is we can just see what like I just showed you when I wrote it out on the whiteboard. We see the first terms, the outer, the inner, and the last. So again, if you want to look at this more in depth, pause the video and do so now, but we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, next let's look at question 44 from the book, which says, which of the following is false? And we have answer choices A, B, C, D, and E. And I just want to make this clear that A is, the square root of A is equal to A raised to the half power. So the exponent is 1 over 2. So I just want to make that clear. So pause the video and go through A, B, C, D, and E, pick out which one is false, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so let's go over how to do this question. So to get this one right, you just have to understand your exponent rules. And so in my book, I cover all of the essential exponent rules that you need to know. But in this video, we're just going to look at a couple of them. And so for the sake of time here, so I want to start off by looking at both B and answer choice E here. Okay, so both of these are correct, meaning that neither one is the answer, because remember, we're looking for which answer choice is false here. So you'll definitely want to memorize these exponent rules if you don't know them already. So we've got here, in just looking at B, we see that we've got x raised to the power of negative a. So x is the base and the exponent is negative a, and that's equal to 1 over x raised to the positive a. So that's a general exponent rule that you just kind of have to memorize that. So let me just show you an example here to put some numbers to it. So let's just pick something random. Like let's say that we have 3 raised to the negative 2. So the base is 3, the exponent is negative 2. Now this is equal to 1 over 3 squared, or another way to say that is 3 raised to the positive 2. Okay, it doesn't matter what the numbers are here, you could pick anything. So I could do another example here, like we could do 9 raised to the negative 4. Okay, we could just rewrite that as 1 divided by 9 raised to the 4th power. Okay, so B is correct here, and E is also correct here. So E is x raised to the negative 33 is equal to 1 over x to the 33. All right, so since B and E are both true, neither one of those is the answer, because again, we're looking for the answer that is false here. Okay, so now let's look at A and let's look at D here. So whenever you see a square root here, so this little symbol here, all right, shows us that this is the square root of A. So we've got the square root of A here. And so we could really, for a square root, we could write a little 2 outside here, and that would tell us that it's a square root. But for a square root, we usually don't write the 2 there. Okay, but I'm going to put the little 2 there just to show you my point here. So we can rewrite the square root of A as A raised to the power of half, okay, or raised to the 1 over 2. Now we could also do this same principle here with our cube root. So let's this time let's put a little 3 out here. Okay, and this time, since we've got a 3, we're talking about the cube root of A. So the cube root of A is equal to 1. It's equal to A raised to 1 over 3. Let me rewrite that here a little bit, make it a little bit clearer. So the cube root of A is equal to A raised to the 1 over 3. Okay, so A is correct here. All right, and again, since we're looking for which one is false, we know that A is not false, so A is not the right answer here. So, but let's look at D here. So here we've got a 5th root, right? So we've got A, and we see that we've got this little 5 out here. Okay, so how can we rewrite this? Let me put a box around this so it's easy to see which part of the question I'm talking about here. So we've got a, we've got the fifth root of a here. Okay, so that is equal to a raised to 1 over 5. Okay, so D is false. And since D is false, that's the correct answer here because, again, we're looking for which of the following is false. And so C is also true here. So you'll also want to memorize C as well. B raised to the n raised to the m. We've got B raised to the n power raised to the m power. That is correct here. So D is our culprit here. D is the only one that is false. Okay, so the next question we're going to look at here is question number 50 from out of the book here. And let me read this to you. So it's 3x cubed plus 66x plus 8 minus x cubed plus 44x plus 123x squared plus 90 minus 86x squared plus x. So go ahead, try this out, pick which one you think it is. Is it A, is it B, C, D, or E? Pause the video, give it a try, and we'll go over it. Okay, let's go over how to do this question. So to do this question, you just simply have to find the like terms and add them up. So what do I mean by like terms here? Well, we can look at the terms here that have cubes in them. So a cube is just a 3. So we have here 3x cubed. So let's look at the terms that have x cubed in them, right? So we see that we've got negative x cubed or minus x cubed, and it looks like those are the only two terms that have an x cubed. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add these terms up, or in this case, we're going to subtract them. So we have 3x cubed. Okay, and so then we have a minus x cubed. Okay, so when we just see that we have 3x cubed minus x cubed, okay, the x cubeds are going to stay just like they are, and we're going to look at the coefficient. Okay, so for the first term here, 3 is our coefficient. And so you can imagine that there's a little 1 in front of this x cubed. We don't usually write the 1, but we just understand that there's a 1 there. So really what we're doing here is we're going to subtract the coefficients. 3 minus 1 is 2, and then we just leave our x cubed. Okay. So that might have just given away that the answer is D. All right, but let's work through the rest of the question anyway. So that's a little trick here that you can use for these kinds of questions. There was another trick that you could have done earlier on in the video. I'm not going to tell you which question it was, but if you saw it, you saw it. Good job. Let me know in the comments if you saw the trick that was similar to this where you could just do the first part of the question, not even do the whole question and get the answer right away. But this is one of those cases where you can do that because the 2x cubed answer here gives it away that it's D, but let's do the rest of the question because you're not always going to be able to use that trick. So now let's look at our x squareds. Okay, so find every number with an x squared. So we've got 123x squared, we've got minus 86x squared. Okay, so now we can do an addition again. So we have 123x squared, and it's going to be minus 86 squared. All right, so minus 86, or not 86 squared, minus 86x squared. Okay, and so you can use your calculator if you'd like to. And again, we're not going to touch the x squareds. We're going to leave those alone, and we're just looking at the coefficients. Okay, so we have our 123 and our 86. So what's 123 minus 86? Use your calculator, and you'll see that that's 37. And we just leave the x squared there. So we have 37x squared. And since it's positive 37x squared, okay, we would just line them up. So we have 2x cubed here plus 37x squared. Okay, so now let's look at the x terms here, right? So we've got, we're looking at the terms with the x's. So we've got 66x, 44x, and just x. So we're going to add these up here. So we do 66x plus 44x and plus x. And so again, that x, we just understand that there's a 1 in front of it, all right? It's just 1x. You can think of it that way too. Okay, so we do 66 plus 44 plus 1, and we leave x alone, and that gives us 111x. Okay, and so then lastly, let's look at the terms without any x's. So that would be 8 and 90, and you add, we would do 8 plus 90, and that's going to be 98. 8 plus 90 equals 98. And so now we can clearly see that D is the correct answer here. Okay, and so that's all you do. You just add the like terms, meaning the terms that have x cubes, the terms that have x squareds, the terms that had just x's, and the terms that were just numbers. Okay, we just add them all up here, and we end up with 2x cubed plus 37x squared plus 111x, 111x plus 98. Now, you know what, I said I wasn't going to give it away, but I will. Back in the FOIL question where we were doing FOIL, you could have just multiplied the first terms, and you could have seen the answer just based off of the multiple choice answer questions. And sometimes you may be able to do that on your test, other times you won't here, but it's important to understand that there are some shortcuts that you can use sometimes, but they won't always work. So you do want to know how to use the FOIL method, and you do want to know how to combine like terms as we did in this question. So the next question is also really important, so let's take a look at that one now. Okay, let's go over number 39 now. So the first and foremost important thing here about this question is to understand that we are dealing with a quadratic equation here. Okay, this 2x squared minus 5x minus 12 is a quadratic equation. And the only way to solve a quadratic equation is by factoring or by using the solution to the quadratic equation. All right, so if you set this equal to 0 and you tried to rearrange it to get x by itself on one side, that is not going to work. All right, and so just be careful. If you did that, then hey, you know what? You got to learn somehow, so don't beat yourself up about it. Okay, you're trying things, and that's how you're going to learn, but just know that on the test, you got to understand that this is a quadratic equation, because if you try to solve it for x using basic algebra and you try to get x by itself on one side, that's just going to waste your time because you won't get the answer that way. So here we go, guys. Let's get into how to do this question. So the easiest way to do it is to just use the solution to a quadratic equation. Now you can also do it by factoring, and I'll show you how to do it by factoring next, but the solution to a quadratic equation is probably the easiest way to get the right answer. Factoring is not really that hard, but it can be a little bit tricky to get the hang of because it's not like that straightforward of a process. You've got to do some kind of guess and check steps along the way. So unless you've got some practice with factoring, I would stick to this solution of a quadratic equation, which I'll show you how to use here, of course, in just a minute. So first we've got to look at our A, our B, and our C. So in the standard form of a quadratic equation, we have A times x squared. So we've got to look up here at our equation here, and we have 2x squared. So hopefully you can see that A is equal to 2. Now, if we look at our B term, in the standard form of a quadratic equation, we have B times x. So to find out what B is, we have to look at the term that just has the x in it, but not the x squared, and that is 5. But we have to remember that it's not just 5, it's minus 5. So we have to bring that minus along for the ride. So B is negative 5. And so lastly is our C. Okay, so we have plus t in the standard form of a quadratic equation, but up in our problem here we have minus 12. So we can't forget to bring that minus along. All right, if you forget that and you just use 12, you're not going to get the right answer. Okay, so A is equal to 2, B is equal to negative 5, and C is equal to negative 12. So this is where the solution to a quadratic equation comes in. All right, and it's really important to understand this. So the formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And on the formula sheet on GED Math, you're going to be given this solution. So you're not going to have to memorize it, and it's probably going to waste a lot of time and brain power if you try to memorize it, but you definitely want to know how to use it. So here's how you do it. So basically, don't worry about this plus and minus until we've done some simplifications here. All right, so let's do some math here. So we have x, and that's equal to the opposite of b. So we have, in other words, we've got minus b here. So we leave the minus here, and so we see b here in the solution of the quadratic equation. We know that b is equal to negative 5, so everywhere we see a b, we're going to put negative 5 in here. Okay, so we've got, but here's where it gets tricky. Okay, it's not just 5, it's negative 5. So it's negative times negative 5. All right, that's why I said it's the opposite of b. So the opposite of b. So we have to write it like this, okay? So in other words, we're doing negative times negative 5, which is just going to end up giving us positive 5. Okay, so b is minus 5. The opposite is just 5. So that's why I said that this is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the whole rest of the works. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Hopefully that makes sense. So we now have this plus or minus. And again, I'm going to show you what to do with the plus or minus in a minute. But we want to do some simplifying here first. So underneath our square root, we have b squared. So again, remember, b is negative 5. So we have negative 5 squared minus 4 times a times c. So we've got minus 4 times our a, which is 2, times our c, which is minus 12. Okay, and then this is all over 2 times a. All right, so stick with me here. This is really important to understand how to do this. All right, I know that this is slow, and I know that it's tedious, but this is really, really important to understand how to do this. So our a is 2, so we're just going to put in 2 here. Okay, so now you want to pull out those, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS, the order of operations rules here. Okay, and so I'm not going to cover that in this video because I've covered it in many, many videos on this channel. You can search my channel and you'll find many videos where I talk about that. But basically, you want to start with what's underneath the square root here. Okay, and so we want to start with our exponents here. So we've got this negative 5 squared. Okay, so negative 5 squared, well, that's the same as negative 5 times negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is just going to give us 25. Okay, positive 25 because we're taking a negative times a negative, so we get positive 25. All right, and so this negative times negative 5, we can just rewrite that as positive 5. So we have positive 5 plus or minus what? Plus or minus the square root of 25, right? And it's 25 again because it's negative 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 12. And so the easiest way to do that would be to just run this in your calculator. So you do negative 4 times 2, which is going to give you 8 times negative 12. So just put that in your calculator and you're going to get 96. So we have 25 plus 96. Okay, and remember, this is all over 4, or I'm sorry, all over 2a. And 2a is 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so now we can simplify this a little bit further. So what is 25 plus 96? Put that in your calculator and you're going to get 121. So we would have 5 plus or minus the square root of 121 divided by 4. Now, the square root of 121 is 11. So we can simplify this even further and we end up with 5 plus or minus 11 divided by 4. Now, why is that 11 again? It's 11 because we have square root of 25 plus 96. So 25 plus 96, again, is equal to 121. So we have the square root of 121, which is 11, which is why I wrote this as 5 plus or minus 11, all divided by 4. So, and remember, this whole thing is set equal to x. So we want to solve for both the plus and for the minus. So what I mean by that is, first we can just do the plus, and then we're going to redo this with the minus here. Okay, so x equals, and let's do the plus first. So you'll see what I mean by that in a minute here. So ignore the minus for a second here, all right? So we're going to do 5 plus 11, which gives us 16. And then that's all over 4. So it's 16 divided by 4. And what does that give us? That just gives us 4. All right, so we know that x is equal to 4. Now we also have to do our minus here. All right, so now we can say x is equal to 5 minus 11 all over 4. Okay, now what's the answer going to be in this case? Well, the quick way to do that would just be to put it in your calculator. Okay, but what you'll see here is we would do 5 minus 11, which gives us 6, or negative 6, because we have 5, which is smaller than 11. So we end up with negative 6 over 4. Okay, so we end up with negative 6 over 4. All right, now if you're using your calculator probably would give you this answer in simplest form. All right, but if you didn't, you can just divide each of these by 2. So we divide 6 by 2, that gives us 3. Divide 4 by 2, that gives us 2. So we end up, if we keep that negative, with negative 3 over 2. So the answer here is B. Now, it may look like, didn't I do a lot of work here in order to get this answer? Didn't I spend a lot of time trying to get the answer here? And the answer is yeah, it took a while because I was explaining how to do this, okay, and it can take you a while unless you practice a lot, but this is all just basic math stuff here, guys. You just have to really understand how to use the solution to the quadratic equation and just understand which term is your A, which term is your B, which term is your C. Plug the numbers in, just do the math in your calculator, and once you get the hang of this, it's not going to take this long. All right, I was explaining it slowly here so that we get the point here, but once you understand how to do this, it should be just plugging numbers into your calculator, and you're going to be able to get the answers using the quadratic. And remember, you've got to do that plus and you've got to do the minus, which is why we get B is the answer. We get x is equal to 4 and x is equal to negative 3 over 2. Okay, so how do you do this by factoring? Well, there's a couple different ways to look at factoring, but this is the method that works the best to get this question right. So basically, you want to look at the A term and the C term. Okay, so our A is 2, and our C is negative 12. So this dot is to represent multiplication. So we do 2 times negative 12, which gives us negative 24. So we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 24, but they also have to add up to negative 5. Okay, so we want two numbers that multiply together to be negative 24, but we want them to also add up to negative 5. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is we can list different combinations of numbers that will give us negative 24. So for example, we could do 2 and what? 2 and negative 12, right? We already looked at that combination. Okay, you could also do it the other way, like negative 2 and just 12. So we already know that 2 and negative 12 and negative 2 and 12, if we multiply these together, they'll give us negative 24. Okay, but that doesn't solve the issue here because we need a pair where the numbers multiply to be negative 24, but they also add up to be negative 5. Okay, so that pair is going to be 3 and negative 8. Okay, and like I said, this does take a little bit of guess and check work, but if you're unsure of what the combination is, just think of numbers that multiply together to be negative 24, list them out until you find a pair that will also add up to be negative 5. So if you do 3 plus negative 8, or another way to look at that is 3 minus 8, okay, you'll see that you'll get minus 5. All right, so 3 and minus 8, that is our combination. So the next step is going to be to look at A. And we want to look at the numerator of A, okay, which is 2. So in this case, we don't usually write a number in the denominator because 2 is a whole number, but you can think of it as 2 divided by 1. All right, so the numerator is just that 2. So we want to divide 3 and negative 8 by 2 and simplify if we can. So 3 divided by 2 is just 3 over 2. That's how you can leave it. You could turn that into a mixed number because that's an improper fraction. You could also turn it into a decimal if you'd like, but we can also just leave it as 3 over 2. So what about negative 8 though? So negative 8 divided by 2 gives us what? Negative 8 divided by 2 gives us negative 4. So we now have two new numbers that we're working with. We have 3 over 2 and we have negative 4. So now what we're going to do is we want to look at the denominator here. So the denominator is just this 1. So we want to multiply the denominator by x, and we're going to add both of these numbers. All right, so we're making two binomials here. Okay, so we have x here. So we have x plus what? Plus 3 over 2. Now we do x plus the other number. So it's x plus, and since this is negative 4, we would just do minus 4. So we have x minus 4. So we have now simplified this to two binomials. And again, okay, the reason it's just x here is because we have to look at a and we look at the denominator, which is just 1. So it's 1 times x and 1 times x. Okay, so it doesn't really matter, right, because it's just 1. All right, so we don't usually write that 1. So that's why we just have our x's here. But if this had been something different, like say this had been a 4, okay, then it would be, instead of just x, it would be 4x here. Okay, and it would be 4x here. Okay, but that's not the case, but I just want to illustrate why we need to also look at that denominator. So we've got two numbers here. And so now what we want to do is we want to set both of these equal to 0, and we want to solve each for x, and that's going to give us the two solutions to our quadratic equation. Okay, so let's set x plus 3 over 2 equal to 0. So we have x plus 3 over 2, and we set this equal to 0. Okay, so to solve for x, we just simply subtract 3 over 2 from both sides of our equation. So 3 over 2 minus 3 over 2, those go away, and we are left with x, and what's x equal to? It's not equal to 0 anymore, it's equal to minus 3 over 2. Now the same exact thing is going to happen with x minus 4. We set that equal to 0, so we do x minus 4, set that equal to 0. So all we do is we solve it for x, okay, and we are left with the 4 on the other side of our equation. So we find that x equals 4, which again confirms that b is the right answer. Okay? So you might be wondering, if you tried to use the FOIL method on these, right? So if you tried to do x squared, you might be wondering, how is this going to give us 2x squared minus 5x minus 12? Okay, can we take this binomial here and can we use the FOIL method and can we turn it back into this 2x squared minus 5x minus 12? Okay, and the answer is, watch this. Let's watch and see what happens here when we do this. So let's do x times x. What does that give us? That just gives us x squared. So now we have x times negative 4, which is going to give us negative 4x, and we're using FOIL method to do this. All right, so we did our first, we did our outers, now we do our inner, which is 3 over 2x. So we now have plus 3 over 2x. Then our last, so we've got minus 3 over 2 times negative 4. Okay, so let's do a little bit of work here. So just do the simplification. We've got a negative 4 here. All right, so we've got negative 4 times negative 3, which would give us negative 12. So we would then have x, let me look for some room to write this here. So let's squeeze it in. You know what, let's move this out of the way here. So we don't need this up here anymore because I want to make sure that we get how to do this here. We're doing a little rearranging here. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so here's where we were. So we've got our x squared. Okay, so let's just go left to right here. So we have negative 4x plus 3 over 2. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to, of course, get a common denominator. So we've got negative 4x plus 3 over 2. And so to add this up, we see that we've got 4x over 1, right? So we have to multiply both the top and the bottom numbers by 2. All right, so we have to multiply this by 2. All right, so what is that going to give us? Well, it gives us x squared minus 8x divided by 2 plus, and this, I should have left that x there, but it's plus 3x divided by 2. Okay, so what's minus 8x plus 3x? What does that give us? Well, it's going to give us minus 5x. Okay, so let me just clear this out of the road here. So that gives us minus 5x divided by 2. All right, and so then what? Well, remember down here we had this minus, so this is x squared minus 5x over 2 minus 3 over 2 times negative 4. Okay, so what about this negative 3 times negative 4? Okay, what does that give us? Well, that's going to give us positive 12 over 2, right? So how did we get that? Well, remember, again, for those, if you're having trouble following this, we did x times x, which gives us x squared. Okay, we then did 3 over 2 times x, which gave us 3 over 2x. Okay, and then lastly, what we did was we had 3 over 2 times negative 4. All right, and so this actually should be positive. So that's what threw this off a little bit here. So, okay, so that should have been a plus sign because we're doing 3 over 2 times negative 4. All right, and so that should have been a plus sign. All right, because after we do that's what the issue was here. So sorry about the confusion because that should be a plus sign. And so then we have 3 times negative 4, which is negative 12 over 2. So look what we've got now. We've got this x squared minus 5x over 2 minus 12 over 2. Okay, so this almost looks like what we've got up here, except we don't have this 2, right? So what happens if we multiply this whole thing by 2? All right, if we multiply everything by 2, what happens? Well, these 2's are going to cancel out, and we now have this 2 here. So it becomes 2x squared minus 5x minus 12. Okay, so just to make sure that we're all clear about why we have this initial step right here, right? So remember, when we had this x plus 3 over 2 times x minus 4, all right, these are two binomials, and if you use the FOIL method, you'll eventually expand them, or you'll use the FOIL method here, and you eventually get this 2x squared minus 5x minus 12 back out. Okay, and so that was why, remember initially when we got this pair of 3 and negative 8, I had you divide by 2. I had you do 3 divided by 2, and I had you do negative 8 over 2, right? So we did negative 8 divided by 2. Okay, so I just wanted to make clear what we were doing here with that step, and so hopefully it's clear when we just have this x plus 3 over 2 and this x minus 4, okay, that you can put these back together and you're left with this x squared minus 5x over 2 minus 12 over 2. Multiply the whole thing by 2, and then you're back to this 2x squared minus 5x minus 12. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. I know that it is a little bit tricky, okay, but just remember that that's the most important point, is that you need to get this pair, this 3 and negative 8 first. Once you've got that 3 and negative 8 here, okay, you divide both by a, okay, by the numerator of a, which was just 2. Okay, then these x's here, you need to multiply those by the denominator, which was just 1. So you now have two pairs, all right? So these are two binomials. So they're not really pairs. I mean, what I mean by pairs are they're x plus 3 over 2 and x minus 4. Okay, so they're each a binomial. So we have these two binomials here. And we can use the FOIL method, and we can take these binomials, and we get the initial quadratic equation back, which I just showed you how that would work out here. But you want to get these two binomials, set them each equal to 0, solve for x, and that's going to give you your answer. If this video was helpful for you, then you don't want to miss my other GED math practice quizzes. So your next step is to take what you've learned and go test yourself with another GED math practice quiz. Good luck. Make sure that you take that other practice quiz to further enhance your skills so you can pass the GED as fast as possible. Thank you again for watching.